Okay, boys and girls, we're off on another adventure today, so get your best wearing shoes, ones that feel comfortable, and your traveling shoes. Get your walking shoes on and get ready to go. Get my hat, my whip, my Discover card, and I guess we better take the keys unless we're planning on walking. Well, hello, and welcome once again to this Alabama adventure. Tonight we'll be getting close to Bigfoot. And to get close to Bigfoot, we're going to be traveling north up to northeast Alabama, Decalb County. We're going to the town of Mentone. Mentone is a beautiful little place up there. Now the stories I have to tell you about Bigfoot were not actually in Mentone. They were in the Mentone area. People were either staying there, camping there, or passing through, or just what. Anyway, we'll get to the stories in just a minute. But anyway, as I always like to say, from the tail end of the Appalachian mountain chain in the heart of the South, this is Alabama Adventures. Now, before we get started on this Alabama adventure, I have a little news on a sad note. A very good friend of mine passed away here a few weeks ago. He passed away at work. He suffered a massive heart attack. I guess it was similar to the one that I had, and but anyway, he did pass away about a month ago now. His name was Tommy Johnson. He and his wife Kelly were the ones that invited us up to Rainsville here about a year or so ago, and we did a paranormal conference, and we just had a great time up there. And then after it was over with, they had made arrangements and invited us to spend the weekend in their cabin. And you can see that cabin on our video, the Twilly cabin. And later on, after we were going to leave that afternoon, they have a annual 4th of July celebration at their house, and they invited us to come back up there, and which we did. They just opened up their house to us just like it was our house. We spent the night with them. Tommy did all the cooking. He cooked on the a grill. We had a great time. That was when I met a lot of paranormal investigators from that area, as well as some into West Georgia. And they told me a lot of paranormal stories, and I've tried to get as many on these videos as I possibly could get down. I did make some notes up there that night. I wish I'd have made more. But on a sad note, before we get started, I do want to say to send my sympathy and condolences to Kelly and her family at their loss of Tommy. Okay, so now here we go. All three of the sightings that I'm going to tell you about, and I'll be checking my DeKalb County file in just a minute, and there are some more in there, but right now, the way that I'm trying to get over my heart attacks and everything is I'm just having to do these videos as I can. So that's why I have 3 stories that I want to tell you tonight rather than try to tell you all of them. The little town of Mentone, Alabama, is where these sightings have taken place. Not actually in the town, but in that area, that end of the county up there, in the Mentone area, is where these sightings have taken place. Okay, the first sighting came to me a while back. A man and his family, his wife and 2 children, were going to do some camping up there. There's a campsite up there somewhere, and I have a friend here in Wadley that he and his wife go up there about once a year, and they were telling me about the campsites and that type of stuff up there. Anyway, they stay in a cabin up there. They rent a cabin up around Mentone somewhere. But anyway, this camping area is somewhere around Mentone. And what happened, it was a primitive campsite, and this man and his wife and his children, as I said, that's where they were going to set up for the night. They were just had a tent, and that's how they wanted to spend a couple of days over the weekend at Mentone. And that's what was going on. He said after they got there and got the tent and everything set up, they got him a fire going out there, because you could build fires at this particular campsite. And he said the children had one tent, and he and his wife had another tent up there. Now, I'm not sure how large these tents were, but they were at least big enough for two people. So anyway, what happened later on that night after they had gone to sleep, he said around maybe 1 or 2 o'clock, they heard this howl out in the woods. Said it wasn't real close to them, but they heard a howl. And at the time, they didn't think too much about Bigfoot or that type of stuff. But he said they heard what sounded like what they had heard on some of the videos that people have done was a Bigfoot howl. Okay, a little about this same time, he said it began a light rain that night. Said it wasn't a very hard rain to begin with. It was just sort of a mist of rain. And he got out there and got the fire going good. So if the kids got frightened by the thunder, if it went to thundering and they got frightened by that, they could come get in the tent with them, or just whatever, so they could see very good out there in the area. Anyway, he said later on that night they began hearing these howls. They seemed like they were getting closer and closer, or hoops, or whatever you want to call them. He said it was more of the long, drawn-out howl, though, was what they were hearing. And he said sometime around about 2:30 that morning, said they heard something out in the brushes and undergrowth out there, sort of stomping around and tromping around. And said, well, they were hoping that maybe it was a deer or something like that, and they didn't pay too much attention to it. But the rain had begun to get a little bit harder, and it had sort of put the fire out some. Not completely, but the fire had sort of died down some, of course, over the night fires do. But anyway, in the meantime, they heard this howl again that sounded very close, like this Bigfoot, a possible Bigfoot that they had heard like on a hill or mountain over there in the distance, had sort of closed in on the fire and everything. So anyway, a little bit later that night, they heard something walking, and it sounded like somebody, because it was 2 feet splashing in the mud out there, not like it was having a big time, just like it was walking through. And his wife sort of got upset or yelled at him there, something that she had seen someone pass by the tent from the light that the fire was throwing off. This figure had passed by the tent, except it was a real large person, whoever it was. So anyway, he gets up and looks around with a flashlight and said he can't see anything. So even though the wood's beginning to get wet out there, he goes and throws a little bit more wood on the fire to try to get it going again, since the rain had gotten a little bit harder and the fire was beginning to go out some. Anyway, they got back in the tent, and he said along about 3:30 or 4 o'clock, said they heard the awfulest sound they had ever heard. This Bigfoot, or whatever it was that sounded like a Bigfoot, seemed like it was just right at the tent, and it made the long yell. And of course, he said him and his wife came up out of their sleeping bags, and that's what they thought it was. Then it was some kind of animal. Said really hadn't thought about a Bigfoot yet, so they just thought that maybe what they had seen pass by the tent was somebody out lost that had been out on one of the trails getting in later that night, because he said there were some other people at the campsite, but there was about 2 campsites between him and anybody else, or between them and anybody else, so they had gone on down into the woods a little deeper. Anyway, he heard this gosh awful sound and said he came up out of the sleeping bag, and his first thought was to go to the other tent to get the kids, to get them in there with him, and that's what he did. He ran across out through there and said it had become pretty muddy out there by now with all the rain that had fell, and the fire was beginning to catch up a little bit. Said they had some good wood that had been dried, even though it had got rained on. Said it was beginning to dry out and catch back up. So he got his 2 children and brought them in the tent with him. And he said a little bit later on that night they heard something else walking by the tent, and sure enough, they all saw this large figure. From the way the fire was shining up against the tent, they could see the outline of this large dark figure as it walked by them, and it put its hand on the tent, and said you could actually say this thing had a large hand, and they believed that it was a Bigfoot now, but said it put its hand on the tent as it walked down the side of it, and said you could just see the indentation of the hand as it went down the side of the tent. And of course, his wife and kids went yelling that they were ready to go. They wanted to go home. They wanted to get out of there. But he said it was so dark, and they had so much stuff set up outside, like coolers and grills and that type of stuff, that he didn't want to leave until it began to get a little bit daylight. But he said they sat there scared to death in the tent that this thing was going to come back, and said every once in a while you could said it didn't come back close to the tent again, but said every once in a while from there on till daylight that morning that you could see this thing walk between the fire and their tent because you could see the outline of it. And he said just as soon as it began to get light that he got out and said that they actually left some stuff up there, but said they all piled into the van as quick as they could see because they didn't want to go out. Said they had flashlights, but said they didn't want to go out in the dark because this thing could be standing right next to the door whenever they went out, and they didn't know what it was up to, if it was mad or angry or had gotten wounded, or if something had happened to the Bigfoot that had it upset. But he said they all got in the van, and he got the van cranked up, letting it warm up while they were sitting there a minute. And he went back after something. I'm not sure if it was a cooler or what, but he said they left some of the chairs, they left a grill. Said they actually just left some of their stuff there because they didn't want to spend any more time there than what they had to. And he said out there next to the fire, said he saw what appeared to be Bigfoot footprints. And while I was talking to him on the phone about this, and I asked him, did he make photographs of it? And he said that was the last thing on his mind, was making pictures to prove that there had been a Bigfoot up there, that they know what they had seen and they know what they had heard, and they were ready to get out of Dodge, so to speak. And that's what he said that they did. He said they got in the van as quick as they could. He said as soon as it sat there and warmed up a little bit, while he went back and got something, I don't forgot what he got. Said I think they left the tents. I think they left the tents there. But he said they lived over in West Georgia, and said they had been coming up there every once in a while, like on the weekend, to camp, to get away from everything, let the kids have a good time, do a little fishing or hiking, whatever they wanted to do. He said they would not be back to the Mentone area to do any more camping, that wound them up there. So that was one of my first reports that I received after I had got back from the hospital and rehab here a while back. It was an email, and he was very upset, and he wanted me to call him as soon as I could. And I've had some other people that have asked me to call them. They want to talk to me about what they've seen and what they've experienced, and I will. You're just going to have to give me some time to where I can sort of be able to do that. I am slowly getting over this heart attack, it seems like, and I do want to thank all of you for all your thoughts and prayers that you've sent my way. That has indeed helped. All righty, now for our next story at Mentone. I'm going to talk about a man. I'm going to call him Jack. That's not his real name, but that's what I'm going to call him in this video. This happened over hunting season. He enjoyed deer hunting. He has a place up there on, I believe, on some of his relatives' land that he sort of keeps up. He has a deer stand in that area, and that's where he was headed on this particular morning. Anyway, what it was, he drove down this little trail or little road toward his hunting stand, and he gets out of his truck, and he walks toward his hunting stand. And of course, he said he was noticing the ground, very careful to see if there were any deer tracks in that particular area. It was a lot of kind of a little dirt road down through the woods, or more of a little trail, like I said. But anyway, he walked down there to the deer stand, and said he got up in it, and said after he had sat there for a little while, he said he heard these two wood knocks, and said they were like to his left, and said in just a little bit over in the woods on the right side of him, he heard two more. And he said he continued sitting there for a little while, and he would hear the two wood knocks on one side, then he would hear two wood knocks over on the other. So he decided that from what he had heard and seen on some of the videos on here about Bigfoot, that was a good sign that Bigfoot was in the area talking back and forth to another Bigfoot with the wood knocks. So he gets down out of the stand and said he slowly started back toward his truck. He said now, when he got there, said it was just a little after daylight that morning when he walked down this road. And he said it was probably about an hour or so later that he had sat there in the stand and these wood knocks had began. So he comes down out of the stand, as I said, and starts walking back toward his truck. And he got right in front of his truck, just a few feet from his truck, and he was watching the ground again to see if there was any deer tracks where something might have crossed or something like that. And he found some Bigfoot tracks, and he made a picture of one that he sent to us, and I'm going to show you that now. Right here, he put his hand down beside the track so you would kind of have an estimate of how big the track was. But anyway, he said he decided to get in the truck and leave. He didn't know if these Bigfoot were watching him or after him, or if they were out hunting also that morning. But he didn't stay around to find out what they had in mind. Anyway, that was a second Bigfoot sighting. Or that actually wasn't a sighting. He just found tracks and heard wood knocks. But this was the second Bigfoot story from Mentone area up there. I do want to add to this story here just a little bit that this was east of Mentone, toward the pretty close, he said, to the Georgia line. And also he said in the email that what bothered him was the tracks were not there like an hour or so earlier when he got out of the truck and was noticing the ground very careful as he walked toward the deer stand. But this Bigfoot had actually walked within about 5 feet of the front end of his truck since he had been gone. So that sort of upset him, kind of bothered him, that this Bigfoot had actually crossed the road, had actually walked where he had walked just a few minutes earlier. Like I said, about an hour and a half earlier, the Bigfoot had stepped across his boot tracks where he had walked down this little dirt path. Okay, now our next Bigfoot story from Mentone will be this one. This happened in the spring of the year. A man and his wife come to Mentone about once a year to have a few days rest of vacation. I'm trying to think of the word. Sometimes things just leave me, but anyway, that's why they had come to Mentone, and they were staying at this bed and breakfast. Now, I'm not sure which bed and breakfast that they were staying at, but he said that's where they had had a room, and that's where they were staying at over a few days. And said they got out almost every morning on one of the trails up there that led down through the woods, down side of one mountain or something, I believe was what he said. Anyway, he said they like to hike down through there. It was just a relaxing time for he and her both. He was a professor at Tulane University. And he said this was just something that they enjoyed doing, and they enjoyed Alabama and coming up to Mentone and getting out in nature and walking around. And he said one morning they didn't see a Bigfoot. They saw some shape. They couldn't tell what it was. It was brown. It was covered with hair. It was walking on two legs. They couldn't see it plainly because it was in the undergrowth and the foliage up there. But it was making a lot of noise as it went down the side of the mountain ahead of them. They undoubtedly got this thing up. It was watching them or something. And he said then going down the mountain there somewhere, there was a little creek that ran across the trail. There was a little bridge there. But anyway, he said as they went across this little creek, that you could see a footprint down in the sand. So, of course, they had a phone like most people do now, and they made a picture of the footprint. And as I said, he said they didn't actually see this thing. They just got a glimpse or two of it as it was running through the foliage and undergrowth out there. But it was brown. It did have long hair. It appeared to be running on walking on two hind legs or 2 feet. And this is a picture of the footprint that they managed to get a picture of that morning. And he said they after they saw this, that they recognized what it was, that it was undoubtedly a Bigfoot footprint. And that's why he sent it to me to get my opinion on it, or the Alabama Bigfoot Society opinion on it. And that's what I believe it was. But he said they stayed on the rest of the time that they had planned to stay up there. They didn't go back down on this particular trail again, but said it was just something that they enjoyed doing, was coming to Mentone and spending some relaxing time up there. So that was 3 sightings over about the last year that we've had, not right in Mentone, but in the Mentone area. So don't go up to Mentone and be looking for a Bigfoot up there. You might see one, and then again you might not. But this was just in that particular area of DeKalb County. Well, I guess I'm going to try to bring this video on to a close tonight. I was trying to say Bigfoot and video at the same time. But anyway, I guess I'll bring this Bigfoot video on to a close right now. And once again, I would like to send my sympathy to the Johnson family up there. And I would like to dedicate this video to the memory of a very good friend of mine, Tommy Johnson, from up around Dogtown, Alabama. It was pretty close to, they don't live exactly in town up there, but I think that's the closest town to where they live. But anyway, I do want to dedicate this video to the memory of Tommy Johnson. Anyway, as I always do, I'd like to tell you that the Alabama Bigfoot Society is run completely out of pocket. And if you would like to make a donation and you're in a position to where you can, that would be very much appreciated. All you have to do is to go on our website, alabamabigfootsociety.com, and there on the front page you'll find a place where you can make that donation. We have caps and t-shirts and patches and some other items on our items for sale page. Go on there and check that stuff out. You might see something on there that you just can't live without, or that you might like to buy for a birthday gift or a Christmas gift later on or something. We would very much appreciate you doing that. Anyway, with all that being said, I guess I'll bring this video to a close. And I'll be looking for you next time on the next Alabama adventure. And until then, may the Great Spirit always walk close to you in your circle of life.